Hello, friends, and welcome back. Today, let's talk about the importance of planning and how it supports both our well being and our goals. When the world starts to feel overwhelming and I feel like I'm drowning in all the things I need to juggle, I tend to turn to self care practices that help me calm my mind. For me, these calming practices include journaling, spending time in nature, and of course, planning. So, what's so special about planning? Why not live spontaneously and just go with the flow? I know some people think that planning is too constricting and too rigid, and I'll talk about the pitfalls of over-planning towards the end of the video. But for the most part, planning is the only way you can get the things that matter to you at the center of your life. We are all trying to balance so many things: our work, our health, our families, our social connections, our money. And in the middle of juggling all of that, we are also bombarded with external things that demand our time and attention. When we don't make our own plans, we end up following the plans that other people have for us. Your boss, your coworkers, big corporations, social media platforms, the news, they all have an agenda for you. You know that there are giant corporations out there spending big money to learn the best ways to entice us, to capture our attention, and to take our money. And those companies are really good at what they do. So without a plan, without intentionality on our own part, we end up following what they have in store for us. So basically, you have so much to handle, and there are billion-dollar industries working really hard to keep you distracted. If you don't have a plan, none of the things that matter to you will happen just accidentally. It's highly unlikely that you will accidentally buy a house or accidentally exercise or accidentally do anything that's worth pursuing. So at its core, planning is about reclaiming your time and your attention. It's about putting all the things you care about and things you value within the mix of all the things you're dealing with day in and day out. Planning is a way to give your dreams a fighting chance to see the light of day. How detailed and intensive your planning needs to be will vary, of course, but planning is how you infuse intentionality into your days. So why is planning self-care? Self-care means taking an active role in ensuring and protecting your well-being. It's about making time for the things that you value while simultaneously reducing stress and having strategies to cope with it when you experience it. And guess what? Planning helps with all of that. Number one, planning frees up your mental bandwidth. When you create a plan or you schedule things in advance, you no longer have to carry those things in your head. Planning is a great way to reduce your mental load. Knowing that all your tasks and priorities have a spot in your schedule, they have dedicated time to be addressed, is a great way to reduce your anxiety and make you feel calmer. It's like scheduling your next dentist appointment at the end of this visit so that you don't have to think about it later. Number two, planning helps you get things done. It helps you make sure that your priorities are addressed. Planning what you need is a great way to create firm boundaries between work and personal life. Planning helps you decide in advance when you will work out, when you will meal plan, what time you need to go to bed to get enough sleep. Those things don't just happen to you by accident. If you didn't plan on doing these things, then your free time would likely be absorbed with checking work emails or scrolling on your phone. You probably wouldn't just accidentally work out when you didn't plan on it. There's a quote from the book Make Time that explains this really well. When you don't have a plan, you have to decide constantly what to do next. And you might get distracted thinking about all the things you should or could do. So when you plan ahead and you pre-decide what you need to do, you can just get to it. You can avoid all the mental gymnastics. Number three, planning supports your future self. Planning is a combination of if-then thinking and harnessing the power of early decisions. It can help you anticipate bottlenecks so you can prevent them or minimize their impact. It helps you spread things out in a more sustainable way so you don't burn out. So if you have something important and time-consuming one week, you can move everything else around that. But if you don't plan ahead, you could end up running around all frantic because you piled everything on. Planning can also help you prepare for potential opportunities. If your friend from out of state is planning to visit on a particular week, you can move things around so you have more free time that week for a spontaneous get-together. Now, these are everyday examples for planning, but also think about the value of long-term planning, like, for example, financial planning to take care of yourself long into the future. And now that I've told you about all the benefits of planning, I'd like to draw your attention to something important. There is a big difference between the planning process and the resulting plan. Planning doesn't mean that everything will happen the way you expected. You will likely have to be flexible and adapt to changing circumstances. Sometimes you get lucky and your plans work out exactly as anticipated, and sometimes they don't. Even if your plans don't work out exactly as you anticipated, you still benefit from having gone through the planning process in the first place. There's a famous quote by Eisenhower that says that plans are worthless, but planning is everything. Eisenhower was talking specifically about preparing for battle, but I think it still applies to general planning. The process of planning forces you to prioritize what needs to be done and build contingencies. It forces you to think through what matters, consider trade-offs, and make decisions. Planning forces you to put together a concrete strategy rather than just having a vague feeling that something should be done. So planning is an ongoing process, an active process of thinking through things and making decisions. But a plan is obsolete the moment you create it. A plan is only a static expression of your thinking at a particular time. It is based on what you knew at the moment you made it. It is only one version of how things can play out. You will likely have to adjust or tweak your plan as new information becomes available to you. But even as your plan evolves, you still benefit from the planning process. Chances are good that your entire plan will not fall apart and only parts of it will need to be adjusted. The rest will still stand. And since you have already been thinking about what you're trying to accomplish, working out strategies and anticipating challenges, it will be so much easier for you to be flexible and to adapt. But beware of getting stuck in planning mode. I mentioned earlier that I wanted to close out this video by talking about the pitfalls of overplanning. The right amount of planning clarifies next steps and protects your time, energy, and attention to make progress on the things that you care about. But sometimes planning feels so good that we can't stop working through our perfect scenario in our minds or on paper. After all, while we're planning, while we're imagining how things could play out, everything can be perfect. The real problem is that sometimes we use planning as a substitute for taking action. For those of us who really enjoy planning, it can easily bring out our perfectionism and turn into a form of procrastination. We end up tweaking, adjusting, and fixing the plan without ever taking action. For example, when we take on a new project or start working on the long-term goal, it can be really tempting to try to figure out every single step in the most minute detail. But at the beginning of something that'll take a while, we don't have all the variables, so we make a lot of assumptions. Trying to work out every single step in advance is just not realistic or feasible. We may have a general sense of where things should be headed, but it is unrealistic to expect that we can plan everything from start to finish. So we shouldn't spend all our time trying to perfectly define what will happen 4 steps ahead of where we are. For longer-term efforts and commitments, it is enough to have a general roadmap of where we're headed. But the detailed planning should happen incrementally as we try things and learn along the way. So if you fall into the trap of over-planning, try to plan just enough that you know what your immediate next steps should be. Remember that the right amount of planning should provide clarity and empower you to take the next steps. If your planning makes you feel overwhelmed and confused, it might be time to scale it back and focus on your immediate next step. I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments how you feel about planning and how you do your planning. I'm always looking for new tips. Remember to take really good care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.